Now I've given the cases a bit of a clean up so we don't get too messy. And what we're going to do is we're going to take out all of these case bolts here so that we can split the crack cases. Now while we've got it like this, what I can mention is you could check the big end bearings, which of course in this are shells, metal shells, by checking for up and down play, and there's absolutely none in this. There'll be a little bit of side to side play, don't let that worry you. The conrod's got to be able to float a little bit in there, but there should be no up and down play whatsoever, so that's fine for that. Also, what you can check at this point, if you strip the motor and you don't want to take the crank out, is for play in the main bearings. You get hold of the crankshaft at either side and again see if there's any play, and there's none whatsoever in these. Now as it happens, I'm going to replace all the bearings in this because it's going to be a complete strip, but that's the way to check that for you. So okay, let's get back round to this side, and what we're going to do is just lay it over. These bolts are 5/16 unified thread, so they take an ordinary 1/2 inch type socket. Two on the inside there, and then the ones around the edges, which are very tight. I actually turned a little bit off this socket to get it in, but there still isn't a lot of space there. Very little space indeed. None at all. Oh. We'll come back to that one in a moment. I hope it doesn't get too noisy because I've forgotten to close the other workshop door, but we will press on regardless. Come out. Washer. Right, let's come back to this awkward one. Oops. You stay put. Ah. Dirty again. Might be on far enough. Yes, at last. Alright, well, let's make sure we've got all of these out. That seems to be it. Now what we're going to do to split the cases now is we are not going to start pounding on here. Not even with a rubber hammer. We have a very simple extractor which uses the 3 alternator mounting studs to take the make the crank split apart. Basically what we're going to is just simply a piece of plate with the 3 holes in it for that and a hole for the crank to go through. Then I've left on the spacing piece that goes here. Put a little piece of tube on. Then we put that on. Washers to spread the load a little bit. The 3 nuts. And then as we tighten these down, it's going to pull the case up against the crank, so it's going to actually pull the crank out. Now I'll tighten these 3 down evenly. So we're getting a nice straight pull. Now you can see the gap coming. And there it comes. With no banging, no thumping, Ugh. No damage to the cases, no damage to the crankshaft. I'll take that piece off. And where does that go? That goes with the clutch side bits. So there we are. Now then, we come back round to this side. And here, as I mentioned, if we had the right puller we could have pulled this off, but what we're actually going to do now is heat this up so that the entire bearing will come out, and then there's enough space for that to go out, and then we'll use the bearing itself because we're going to replace the bearing. This to a certain extent is a total loss system, if you like, because pulling the bearing off with this probably won't do the bearing any good, but we're going to change the bearing. That's the whole point of stripping us down to the crankshaft. So we'll take it off. So for those of you who are going to write in and say, God, you shouldn't do it like that, just spend a few dollars to buy that. There are always ways and ways, and depending on your ultimate requirement decides what's going to happen. So I'm going to find a little box to stand this on and get the torch. We're just going to heat it up with propane. We don't need to heat it up too much. We're going to have lots of oil burning off, and there's an old gasket here from the oil pump. So now you could support this in various ways, but I've just got a box, and because it's a biggish box I've actually packed it with rags inside so that the crank isn't just going to fall out and drop down all the way to it. It'll just settle into the cloths. Oh, this is going to be awful. We'll give this a little tap with a bit of brass. If you've got a brass hammer, or as I have here, a sort of large piece of brass, we'll just give it a little bit of a bump because the rubber tends to absorb some of the blow. And it should really be starting to loosen its grip by now. There it goes. And out. And now we have the whole thing's dropped out. And as I say, we would have had to take this bearing out anyway, because we were going to replace it. So this is just a dodge, shortcut, or whatever you want to call it. But for those of us, as I say again and again and again and again, who don't have $1 million dollars or pounds worth of equipment, it works. Now of course we have to let everything cool down. There's our crank out. So now we can just pull it off using the bearing, because we don't mind sacrificing the bearing. So we'll get ourselves set up to do that, and as per usual we will plunge you into darkness. Now I've got the crank clamped in the vise with the soft jaws on, of course, and this is the puller we used earlier because it's got very thin little jaws. I had ground them out actually slightly, and now we can just tighten that up a little. Oh, I need something to hold that. And of course it isn't big enough. So we'll have to use these. Think which way we're going. That way. And there we go. There, everything comes off. The bearing which we're going to throw away, and our worm drive and spacing piece that goes on there. This is specifically for this type of bearing. I don't know if you can see it, it goes right down almost to a knife edge, so that it fits in right behind the bearing in tight places. Thus, again, this is another puller which is basically going to ruin the bearing, but what's the point of taking these bearings off if you're not going to replace them? Helps if you know what you're doing. But as you've all seen, when has that ever stopped me before? Whoop, hey! Oh! And there we go. Both bearings off, properly pulled, no damage to anything. The next thing we will do is take out these two nuts here so we can take the conrod off and check the shells. And there, look, there was a little spacer underneath. Where are we? It was actually underneath that bearing there. So we'll keep that. Move on. Last job on the crankshaft is to take the big end cap off here so we can get into the big end shells. Now, as we saw, there's actually no play at all in these, so if it wasn't for the fact I had the crank out, I wouldn't disturb this. But if you've got the crank out, what you should really do is clean out the oil ways, because there's the equivalent of a sludge trap here. It doesn't have a tube in it like the twins do, Triumph and BSA, but it is designed to catch the sludge. The oil goes in the end, comes along here, and then because these are spinning, it's a little bit like a centrifuge in a lab. The outward forces, the centrifugal force, throws any solid matter outwards to the edge of the flywheel instead of going through, up into the crank pin and then lubricating the shells there. So you can't clean these ways out without taking the conrod out, because if you do, all you're going to do is push any sludge up to this end and it's going to block off the oil way right there by the bearing. So we're going to take this off just to be able to clean this out. These, by the way, are an absolute bugger to get out. Certainly the Triumph ones, I don't think I've ever taken one out without either completely destroying the slot or even having to drill it out and use an extractor. With the Triumph ones, it's sort of flush, and what they do is with a punch they sort of pop it right on the thread so that it folds a little bit of the plug into the thread. And supposedly, you know, it's another one of these wonderful things in the manual, you just drill that out and out it comes, but they don't. Fortunately, the replacement ones, the Triumphs, come with an Allen head in them, so they're a lot easier to put in. But this one, well, you'll see when we get to it. So the first thing we're going to do is take the big end bolts off. And by the way, excuse me again, you do not put big end bolts back in. Breaking my own safety rules, wearing my glasses, excuse me. And I can tell you from personal experience, the one time you don't use your glasses is the one time you need them. There we go. You notice there's a little slot here for that to come out of. They are marked a little, but other than that, crank pin looks good. You look for scoring, things like that, and if need be, what you do is you get that crank pin ground smaller, and then you get shells which are an equal thickness to take up that. What am I talking about here? The shells are thicker, so they fill up the gap that you've taken, and you, like a rebore, you get them in sort of 10th thou increments. They'll make that 10th thou smaller, they'll make these 5th thou thicker because there's 5th thou on either side. You'll also notice here there is a hole. So if you put newer shells in and they don't come with holes, remember to put the hole in, because there's another hole here, and that's where the oil comes out of. It also just squeezes out. You don't want to lose too much pressure on this shell, but that's where it comes out and it gets underneath the piston and it lubricates the top part of the motor. So there we go. I don't know if you can see the hole there in the crank, but that's how the oil comes through. So now, well, let me mention one other thing. These come marked. Pop mark there, and there is, it's even harder to see on this one, a pop mark there. The cap goes back on in the way it came off. As I say, we're going to replace these as a matter of course because they're really tightened down and they stretch and it fatigues them. The next thing we're going to hope is we can take this out. We're going to try a screwdriver head in this. I thought I had a bigger one actually, and they are really, because it's just a straight slot, they don't stay in the slot very well. So you never know, you might see me lose some fingers here. Move them around so I can actually press it against there. Shit. Never yet known these things come out right. Well, maybe try and slow it down a bit. But I would say we're going to end up drilling this out. Oh, it moved a little, would you believe? Not enough, I don't think. No, it didn't move. Wish, oh. Actually broken the end off the screwdriver, would you believe? Shoot. I hate these. Hate, loathe and detest them. Yep. Extractor job, you can see what a mess it's made of it. So I actually might cheat with this because of the pain. I've got to go and see my friend Dave tomorrow, who has the big machine shop. We might put it in his mill. I could put it in the drill press and drill it out, but if we put it in his bigger mill, we can mill the top off and to get rid of the slot, and then it's much easier to drill it. And it's more exact. We can drill it almost to the threads and hopefully get it out in one. Alright, so that's what should have happened, but this is real life. And that is why it's all such a pain. So anyway, that is the engine completely dismantled. Next thing to do will be work our way through, and we'll do the mods and we'll do the replacement of things like valve guides. We'll put the new plug in there, we'll put new bearings in the cases. As I say, for the gearbox I've got a completely new set of gears. The last one, actually, I could only get a used one. I think this is Lathe shaft second gear. I'm replacing 6 pinions, first, second and third gear in the box. First, second and third, and I think it was third on one shaft, so it was first, second and third on the main shaft and third on the lathe shaft. I got no problem. I'm very reasonably priced. Then I think it was first gear on the other shaft. I got the very last one from my supplier in Canada, and it was expensive. And this one, I managed to track down someone who had a used one. So we'll see what happens with them. But that will give us the same internal ratios as a C15T, which Ian, who I'm building this for, has a couple of them, and as he says, he was brought up on them, so he is used to riding the sections with that set of ratios. So that's it for engine dismantling. Next set of videos will be the engine rebuild, and I'll see you then. Bye now.